I think I'll try and answer this on behalf of all the sort of enthusiastic amateurs out there. I've never made money out of photography. I think I've only sold one set of photographs in my entire life, but I love it. And I love the interaction with people. I love taking pictures now of people. I didn't always do that. But it's an enthusiasm, and it doesn't have to be a professional trade.
That's Tom Warburton, who certainly shaped my thoughts for my little monologue from this path thingy. I wish that alliterated better. I want to start this week's show by talking about adventure and purpose. Steady on, Neil. Can't we start with something more relaxing, like bacon and butty? And I think, thinking about it, and try not to use think in a sentence again, that I'm going to share with you, I think, my latest incarnation of my own why. I spend so much time asking other people what their why is. I don't think I've given it a lot of thought myself of late, because it continually changes. A great sweeping generalization, but my life has more adventure and more creative purpose, which is a grand statement, yes, thanks to being able to record it, to pictorially journal it, and also record it in sound as well. You might not know it, but please appreciate it. The fact that you're listening to these steps I take each week, and have been since that COVID thing, is probably one of the most creatively life-affirming experiences I've had in the, and I did have to get some help on this, 21,024 days that I've dribbled, crawled, and walked this life. And yes, I have just described a typical meander home on a Friday night via Gassan's kebab truck. There is, I believe, a quiet thrill in setting off with your cameras. Whatever that flavour of picture-making kit is, you step outside with it, and something shifts. The world, which just moments ago might have appeared a bit ordinary, offers up, as we said last week, the most interesting of stuff. And that's one of the reasons I like to think this podcast has resonated well with those who so generously afford me the time, an hour and a half to 2 hours weekly. Honestly, you listen to me more in one listening session than my family does in an entire week, probably. You see, photography, pun intended, when you're out with a camera, it's not just about what's in the frame. It's about where that frame can take you, the places that you end up, the people that you meet, the stories that you collect along the way. Remember Bernard from last week I met along the path? Well, I've met him twice since in the last week, and we've chatted more, and I'm getting a pretty good picture, pun intended again, of why Bernard walks that same path day after day after day, and has done for years. I'm going to use my favourite phrase now, stand by. Photography is my passport, not just to landscapes and cities, that sort of thing, no, but to moments I frankly wouldn't have found any other way. A passport to curiosity, Neil, yes, a passport to curiosity. If I had a line of merch, that would be one of the t-shirts. But yeah, photography brings adventures. Be they big adventures, micro ones, and every size in between. Although I will say this, as politicians say when they're buying thinking time, today's adventures on the show that I'm talking about with my guest Tom Warburton are, I think it is fair to say, pretty much life-changing flavoured ones. Of course, not all adventures have to be that way. Adventure, I think, is too often painted as having to be something ginormous. The sorts of stories you only tell at those dinner parties if somebody's plied you with a lot of Chateau Neuf to fall over. Let me tell you again about the grizzly bear I fended off with my 70 to 200 millimetre. Just me, just the bear, and all its teeth in the bedding department of IKEA. Now, of course, some photographers do pack for larger life adventures. One moment driving a desk in an office, the next navigating a good stretch of the length of one of the world's longest rivers, certainly one of Asia's, and that's what today's show is partly about. There's a reason I've used perhaps one of the stranger titles for a show yet. Life Lessons from a Retired Mediocre Bureaucrat. Not exactly one that trips off the tongue, but I think it's quite good, actually, because this is a show about discovering adventure and, if you will, a different kind of purpose. When the life you knew, the one you navigated every day, changes. Like when something finishes, like a career or a chapter. And I do think in those moments, photography can bring about an elevated amount of purpose, a new, perhaps renewed sense of direction or creative vigour. I tried to explain this recently to somebody who couldn't understand my own quest for adventure as my beard begins to grey. I know it's greyed already, or got longer perhaps. I think I gave them a bit of a half-baked answer at the time, but I did go away and think about this a bit more for this monologue thing. And I've had to write this sentence down. I do wish I had a brain that operated like Sean Tucker's when it comes to just simply being able to ad-lib this life mission stuff. Alas, I do not have that brain, but here goes. And just so you don't think I'm being rude, it's Tom, my guest, not me, who describes himself as a retired mediocre bureaucrat. Adventure, purpose, and a camera. Actually, this could be the why that's forever, third photography pun fully intended now, developing in my mind. Adventure and purpose with a camera. Photography, I think it gives a purpose to travel and life by turning curiosity into a creative mission. And it's not just about being somewhere, it's about seeing it and feeling it and bringing something meaningful back.
Today on the Photowalk.
It's a sort of family joke my girls and I joke about is, what would you put on your gravestone? Oh. And we put mediocre bureaucrat. What I would really have liked is, National Geographic world-class photographer, but it never really happened like that. We went to the Royal Bathing Day together, and that was the first time I'd really been in the big crowd. And, it's pretty intense. I mean, it's absolutely packed. And getting into the right position with your camera was really quite tricky. I waved my posh camera at them and went, press. And it said, follow me, sir. Took me through the barriers, took me across this massive crowd, through the barriers, got his police mates to open the barriers and let me through into the press area. They honour the river as a goddess every day at dawn and sunset. It's just what a brilliant thing.
That's Tom Warburton, my guest on the show today. Welcome along as we make our photo walk each week, photographically sketchbooking our time together, accompanied by inspirational stories you send in and the guests that we spend our time with. Before we head out on a walk with a guest today, who is a reasonably regular contributor into the show by letter, usually, I'd like to personally thank those who are Patreon members of our community, or extra milers, as you're very affectionately known, because your belief in this show, your desire to keep us walking together week after week after week is the why and the how of this podcast. 10% of those who download the show each week are extra milers. And I want you to know that I never take that for granted. And that's why I record an extra show for you every single week, and we meet up on Zoom once a month. We've just had this month's meeting, actually. This week, the Extra Mile features Valerie Jardin and more questions to our street photographer in the art world, Mark Fernley. Also, thank you to arthelper.ai, which helps you sell your photos online by making the posts and the mock-ups and the marketing emails for you. If you've ever wanted to sell your photos but haven't a clue how and where to start, arthelper.ai, they do the hard bits for you. And you get 30 days free with the code PHOTOWALK if you go to the website. And I'm delighted that they've decided to join us on our adventure for another 3 months. So thank you for your belief, arthelper.ai. So, a walk today with the photographer Tom Warburton, and I've changed the title for the show, which is going to be a little bit confusing because I do reference that I call this show Life Lessons from a Retired Mediocre Bureaucrat, because I really liked that title, and it is a bit odd. I do odd, but in the end I've gone for the 1,100 kilometre photo walk, because I thought that might really garner attention, although I've used the life lessons as a byline. just in case you were or will be confused about me referencing the title of the show. Plus, during the programme today, we'll have this month's one-word assignment, which is set by Dennis Linden. So, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi biscuits. Well, I've got to be honest, I forgot to take them, but we'll check it off your list. Walking boots, check. Have you got spare film or an extra SD card for the path? Check. And actually a good walking sock or two, because we're about to walk over 1,000 kilometres. Let's walk. I did think, actually, today's walk, it being one of those episodes where I walk with my guest out in the countryside together, might be a bit of a route march. A 6-foot-something or other walking machine, as you're about to find out, versus me with my smaller gait and a furry barking thing with front legs that measure just under 30 centimetres. And yes, I did take a ruler to him to research that. Hey, Barney? Not like one of those strapping, leggy, athletic dogs with strappy, leggy, athletic owners that we see, the lycra-clad running partnerships that breeze past us on the path. Morning. They always have this sort of deep, resonant kind of "haven't I done well" voices as they go past. Lycra clad. Should we get some lycra? Bark a lot, shall we? What do you think? Digital or a film one? Are you getting my joke? You're not. It's passing over your head, isn't it? We'll go to the lycra store with Giles next time we're in London. Hey? See if we can pick up a decent lycra M3. It's just passing you by, that joke, isn't it? Right, to my guest this week then. I do have a stack of letters and I shall return to them next week. This week, as I say, is a walking episode, and a good part of it will cover a long walk, a very long walk indeed, made by Tom Warburton as, I suppose, a kind of informal photographic pilgrimage, actually. My word's not his. And in a week where across Europe in particular the cessation of war is being respected and observed, we're walking along paths, these ones here, that saw Dakotas take off, towing gliders and dropping paratroopers into Normandy. Yes, we're at Greenham Common. And right on cue, an aircraft for once above my head that I'm not saying, go away, I'm trying to find peace. The perfect sound to accompany this piece. We really should do a show about this part of Greenham Common's history too, because there's evidence that this land that I'm walking on was walked on by people thousands of years ago, making their own podcast, no doubt, I'm sure. But flint tools, prehistoric earthworks, even Roman remains have been found around here. Getting poetic for a moment, it's the sort of place that held layers of life long before it found itself fenced off for war and the nuclear weapons it went on to house during the 1980s. I like today's story and the walk because it features a photographer who's had an interest in photography for a large portion of his life, like many of us have. And Tom, well, he also has a definite adventurous and altruistic direction of travel in his life. Some photographic itches to scratch now he has the time, I suspect. I exchanged a couple of mails, actually, with Tom before we walked, and he sent me a short list of near misses photographically during his life. I'll quote, "I always wanted to do more documentary-style stuff," said Tom, and have been frustrated by missing some of the biggest stories and issues over the years. The big British miners' strike. I was at uni. Tiananmen Square, a friend I was travelling with was there and had asked me to join him, but I stayed in Thailand. Missed it. Fall of the Berlin Wall. I was ill that day. Foot and mouth. I was at work helping the economic recovery programmes and couldn't be at home, which was actually a farm, right in the thick of it. So no, National Geographic didn't come knocking for Tom Warburton, but let's be honest, they don't knock for most of us. And yet that doesn't mean the urge to explore disappears. Some of us find our own paths, our own visual adventures, one frame at a time. And that's Tom, really. He calls himself a retired mediocre bureaucrat. But if you spend 5 minutes with Tom, as we're about to do today on this episode, you'll know he's anything but. There's always a slight joy when I walk with somebody who's never been on Greenham Common before, because I think it's a fantastic place to walk. We record many of the podcasts here, myself and Barney, and you walking with us. And today, actually, it's wonderful to be joined by Tom Warburton, who is a name you will know because I've featured Tom's letters before. And recently we were talking about an extraordinary walk that we're about to talk about. And it's one of those Photowalk episodes. It's a gentle meander and a conversation with somebody for whom photography, as you'll find out, is really important, but didn't actually become their job. I don't know whether that's sadly or with regret or...
I'm probably much better off as a result of not working in photography.
Yeah. Financially, no sadness at all.
No sadness at all.
No.
Yeah. But probably a little bit creatively, maybe a little bit sad. But I think, well, we were just talking, weren't we, before, that how anyone makes money out of photography and how, I don't know. So now, later in life, because I've retired, it's an absolute pleasure to have a passion, something to do.
I told you, by the way, this would happen.
Hello,
right, come here. See, I told you, Tom, what happens is we start to talk and I get the clipboard out and come here.
It's good to meet Barney.
Let's make friends, all right? I've got a very important podcast to record here with Tom. Now he's on the lead, you see, so it's not helped his calls. Huh? We're going to come up upon the place where they keep the cows, and it's calving at the moment, so it's probably for the best. Where were we, Tom?
Greenham Common.
I can't work with this, he says. I'm a professional, yes. Oh, professional, working as a photographer. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, I imagine it is, yeah. I'm in the lucky position now that I don't have to earn any money, retired. So I'm really enjoying having adventures and taking my camera with me, really, which we'll come on to, no doubt.
Well, I like this. Retired, mediocre bureaucrat.
Yeah.
Is that on your business card?
No, it's a sort of family joke. My girls and I joke about is, what would you put on your gravestone?
Oh.
And we put mediocre bureaucrat. What I would really have liked is, National Geographic world-class photographer, but it never really happened like that.
We'll want that.
So it's a sort of family joke, and it really annoys my old colleagues because, and I took my job very, very seriously, and I did a good job, but it really annoys them when I call myself, just a mediocre bureaucrat.
Well, what bureaucracy were you into then?
Well, latterly I did about 10 years at Newcastle City Council,
right?
Maybe 9 years as a director there. And before that I worked for various government agencies. Probably the most relevant is the last sort of 9 years, something like that, at Newcastle Council.
So you really did have the pinstripe suit?
No, never had a pinstripe suit. No, I was a director there, so I had a big team of... I ran the departments of transport and housing and planning and economic development, and I did a few other jobs as well. But the last 2 years was COVID. And in the UK, I know you have listeners all over the world, so in the UK, the local authorities, the sort of local council, they are the health authority, as well as, picking up the bins and all that sort of thing. So we were right at the sort of response to the COVID epidemic, not the medical side, but the social side about food and how people were sheltering and what services they needed to keep everything going during the sort of what ended up being sort of 2 years of interruption. So that was pretty hard work. We were all pretty on it all the time. So after it finished, when 2021, that'd be late 21, there was quite a few of us took the opportunity, like the chief executive. She'd stayed on 2 years after she wanted to retire because she couldn't leave whilst there was a pandemic. And the director of public health retired as well. And I just took the opportunity to take early retirement because we'd had a really tough 2 years.
Yeah, blimey.
So I've been on various adventures since, which we'll no doubt talk about.
Well, you were doing serious work while I was sat down on what we affectionately call in our back garden the bench.
Okay.
Partly because it was falling apart. Yeah. And partly because of what was falling on it from the pigeons above in the wonderful trees that we have. But while I was doing that, supping Pinot Grigio in the afternoon, you were doing the serious work.
The lockdowns were funny. We were all sent home and everyone working on remotely. But because we had sort of emergency response teams, particularly dealing with delivering medicines to people or delivering food, emergency food to people, I was going into work into the office occasionally. Most of the time you had to stay at home. I had a flat in Newcastle at the time. But yeah, we were out more than most because we were undertaking, key what in the UK was called key worker work.
Yeah. I really didn't like that very much. It became a two-tier society. You were either key or you weren't. And whilst I entirely appreciate, of course, what those in the services, including medical services, yourself and other people were doing to keep us all safe and do their bit, this idea that I suddenly found myself, and it was suddenly, in some respects, it felt like I was a feckless part of society. I wasn't key. I wasn't important. And I don't think that helped.
No,
and when
not,
people started putting bumper stickers on their cars saying "key worker," for me, it sort of underlined my uselessness.
My apologies, it wasn't my idea. But my favourite little anecdote about that is the bin men, and I'm sure this happened all over the country.
Who were key, of course.
They were key, yeah. So early on, we thought that about 20% of the workforce might be off at any one time with COVID. So the jobs like picking up the bins, you can't do by staying at home. You have to be out there. So we made contingency plans, or the director in charge of that, Christine, made contingency plans for having about 20% of the workforce off at any one time. And the normal rate of not turning up to work at the bin men was quite high because they're all fairly older men and they've got bad backs and, blah, blah. So the sort of sickness rate was quite high. Anyway, as soon as they were called key workers, they all turned up. And the sickness rate actually got better. The absentee sort of day rate got better because they all turned up because they were absolute key workers. And it motivated them, to get to work. And they were getting clapped around the streets and cheered and all this sort of thing.
Of course, I appreciate. We went out. Was it every Thursday or was it a Wednesday?
Thursday,
was it Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. We go out and bang our tins. It was the only time we were allowed to come less than 50 metres away from our next door neighbours, and we'd be there with our pots and pans. We stayed faithful to that, and the police would actually drive up and down the road at that stage with their sirens blaring and in support as well, the local police. It was quite a time, wasn't it?
So I can sort of segue into photography there because I was at work and I was doing my job, but because I'd sort of suddenly realised that I had a bit more flexibility than others because you were locked up at home and weren't legally not allowed to leave home, I started taking my camera into work. And during the first lockdown, it wasn't particularly interesting. I took some photographs of the bin men and I took some photographs of the food deliveries and, odd things that I could. But after was it 12 weeks lockdown, the first lockdown? I can't remember.
It was about 3 months,
yeah, something like that. After that, I'd got a little bit of a record of what had happened during that period. And obviously I was involved in the city's response. So I sort of talked to the people in the hospital and said, look, I'd quite like to make a record of the impact of this on the city. Is there any way I could get access to the hospital? And bless them, it was mainly the assistant chief executive and the head of comms said, well, actually, we're inundated with requests, but from the press.
Right.
And they wanted sort of the next day's headline. And I said, well, I don't want that. I just want to take some photographs and I'll give you all the copies. I'll give it all to you. Would just try and record something of the response. So initially, the first visit to the hospital, I took pictures of cleaners. I didn't go in the COVID wards. It was the back office staff, really. People they've got a chapel, including the mortuary, which we'll come back to. Well, I didn't see anything particularly bad, but the mortuary staff, I should say, and took this picture of the guy called Paul, who ended up being on the front, the sort of poster boy. He didn't realise it at the time. Anyway, so that was fine. And then right at the end of that visit, I wasn't allowed to go anywhere without the senior nurse director in charge of infectious disease control. She was right on my shoulder all the time so that we didn't do anything wrong. And Alison, she was called Alison Sykes, she sort of took it upon herself, thought this is really important, we should record more. So every now and again, I think I only went in twice, more, 3 times in total. Alison would ring me up and say, I can take you around tomorrow. And I've ended up, with their permission and with the patient's permission, I should stress, taking pictures of the COVID patients that were in the hospital. So I ended up with, over the 2 years, with a record of the health service, the ambulances, the council, the vaccination programmes, everything really.
You had more access than many photojournalists because
totally.
Photojournalists at the time were there was a good deal of anger actually from photojournalists and journalists who said we're not being given access and we're not able to tell the true story.
Yes, and I mean I talked to the comms team at the hospital, and I don't know if you remember, Newcastle had the first case in the UK. It was the first ever COVID case came to Newcastle, and they were inundated with requests. And I can it was an infectious disease. It was really important to keep people out. But I know 1 or 2 photographers in Newcastle were really frustrated by that they couldn't get in. It just so happened that I'm not a photojournalist and I'm not professional in a way, but reasonably competent. And I thought, well, I have got access. I'm already got access. So I just started taking my camera into work. Well, not every day. I didn't go into work every day. I was at home, on the endless Teams calls most of the time. So I've ended up with a really pretty thorough record of the impact of COVID in a city. And the sort of library service in the city have a little publishing company. So they put it together, and I've given all the pictures both to the Hospital Trust and to the archive, the Tyne and Wear archive. So it's not exactly a bestseller, but hopefully maybe on the 10th or the 20th anniversary, it'll give some indication of what happened during the time.
In 100 years' time, when we revisit that date, that's incredible to think that your pictures form the archive of that area's history. We painted a bench.
That was your record.
That was it. And the bench finally faded last year and got painted over. Yeah. You made a record of that for an entire community for generations and generations to come. See? When I know this is slightly dark humour, but you know my love of Monty Python. Yeah. You were talking about what you wanted on your tombstone. I think what will go on mine is one word. Yeah. It's going to be nearly. Yeah. We are going to talk about India. But not yet. Well, we're going to talk about India slightly now, and then this tremendous adventure that you've had over the last 12 months. We'll come on to that at some stage. I've got lots to talk about here. We've got photography influences. I think we've covered the frustrated documentary photographer bit.
Still time.
There's still time. Well, I want to come to Ukraine, actually. That is something important I want to talk about. But actually, your first brush with India was 1989, wasn't it?
Yeah, in my youth, I was about, 23, 24. I did a couple of years sort of backpacking around the world, which was fantastic. I'm a farm boy from Cumbria, so I mostly worked on farms.
Cattle or?
At home, they've got dairy cows, yeah. Right. But I had the fantastic qualification of being able to drive a tractor and a trailer, which is all you need to travel the world, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Slowly, very slowly,
yeah. I was once driving a combine at 3 miles an hour for 14 hours a day. Ooh. That's just fun. Anyway, I travelled the world for a couple of years, really, and I was fit and healthy, and I'd just come out of Australia, and I thought I was indestructible. And I flew into Calcutta, and I think I managed 23 days before I was completely broken. Ooh. And had to fly home from Delhi because the infamous Delhi belly, but I actually caught it in Calcutta, just completely broke me.
When you say you caught it, people don't catch Delhi belly, they eat something.
Usually. I don't know how I got it. Was a parasitic amoeba called.
Had you swum or something? Or?
No, I think it was just eating in a. This was 1989. Yeah, I should say. If anyone's planning to go to India with you, don't worry, the food's brilliant. but back then,
the food is what you make it. We did have a few cases of Delhi belly, but These days, with modern advances of medicines and stuff, it was done within a few hours, really.
Yeah, and I wasn't my best. I was just a stupid young lad, really, and I got belly. Didn't really try to get any medical help, and ended up absolutely broken by it. And I remember when I got home, my uncle said to me that you're going to have to go back, sort of thing. And it took me 34 years to go back to India, but it was always in the back of my head that I have to go back, because it sort of felt like I'd not really done it.
By the way, we've just, I think when I was trying to catch the dog and editing those two pieces together, we've walked, it's not even a quarter of the runway, by the way.
Huge. It's absolutely huge, this place.
So the end of the runway is somewhere around about here, or would have been somewhere around about here, perhaps a little bit further on. These huge, there's one over there actually, you see pits as they are, but they would once upon a time have had, that'd have been the fuel dumps. There were plans to have this as another airport.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting to be here because, from probably people of our age, remember it as the 1980s American Air Force base with the nuclear missiles. And it was controversial. It was infamous, isn't it? Yeah. And so it's fascinating to actually come and see it for what's left of it, anyway.
Well, I only found out last week that a 5-minute air raid siren or nuclear siren was sounded every single Friday as a test, which could be heard for miles and miles around. That must have been a horrible sound.
Yeah, God, you can't believe it, really.
But we are left with this extraordinary, beautiful nature reserve as such to walk around. There's the trees over there, you can go into woodland. And it does get very brisk up here. So where we're walking now, we're on a windless day, but usually the wind is whistling through here. And it's not particularly pleasant in the winter, I can tell you, so the woodland is my friend then. Right, photography influences. Where do we start? Kadelka. No, we're not going to skip this bit. Your favourite is Mick Critchlow's Coal Town. Yeah. Chris Killip's got a mention in there as well for his Isle of Man stuff.
There's a link between those two, I believe. Right, okay. So I think you better just check out my factoids. But Mick Critchlow was a local guy from Ashington in Northumberland, and he, photographed Ashington all his life, really, and never made money from it till later in life. I think he had a music shop or something like that. But anyway, he was the guy that helped Chris Killip get access to the sea coalers, I believe. He's kind of had a relationship with the sea coalers. And
it's probably worth saying who the sea coalers were.
Oh, you're asking me to... So Chris Killip is a very famous British documentary photographer. Much loved. Brilliant exhibition and brilliant book recently. Retrospective. One of his projects was photographing the sea coalers, which were the people on the northeast coast that used to scavenge bits of coal from the sea beaches.
That's right.
And he sort of deeply embedded photography. I think he lived in a caravan on the beach with them for a lot of for months, I think. And he's got an incredible kind of record. My understanding of it, and I might be slightly wrong, is somehow Mick Critchlow was involved in sort of negotiating the access for Chris Killip. Yeah. But Mick Critchlow, sadly now, has died. Yeah. But he, later in life, they put all his record of the life in Ashington together into a book called Coal Town. And it's brilliant, Blue Coat Press. And I just love it. It's just great. Guy that, nobody had ever heard of, just got on with his life and then kept this amazing archive of photography that later in life became a better record of what in the end was, because the coal mines closed and that community kind of, that culture went, or to a certain extent went, and he had a photographic record of it. So
I always think that the photographers that photograph for the purest reasons like that and they're incredible bodies of work. They fascinate me. James Revilius is a name often mooted in conversations with my good friend Giles Penfound. Revilius is one of Giles's favourite photographers, and there's another one who'd been working and living in London and up sticks and went to rural life in the southwest of England and made these extraordinary documents of life there without probably realising just how much significance they would have for photography generations to come.
Yeah, in Newcastle, and again, I'm not the expert in this, but there's the Side Gallery and the Amber Collective. Have you heard of? So there's a photographic, sadly closed now, but the Side Gallery is a photographic exhibition space in Newcastle, which had a long sort of 60s, 70s, had a long history of documentary photography. So there's quite a lot of historical links. Tish Murtha's probably the other one that's become. She was in Newcastle and became in her community became a documentary photographer, and then again sadly died. But her daughters published the books through Bluecoat, and they're amazing record. Yeah. So people that aren't making money out of photography but are doing it, for the love, and then, they end up with a record of a particular community or their community. Amazing. I love it.
I have to mention Kudelka, another favourite of Giles's.
Yeah, Kudelka, yeah. Gypsies is my favourite. I haven't got a copy, but I was going to do a shout-out. If anyone's got a copy of Kudelka's Wall at an affordable price, I would love it. If you've watched there's a documentary about him making it, which is online. And that amazing. It's a panoramic landscape pictures of the wall, the barrier walls between the Palestinians and the Jewish communities in Israel. And he makes this link between. He grew up behind the Iron Curtain in Czechoslovakia, wasn't it? Yeah. So he makes this connection between I grew up behind a wall and both sides, communities there, are behind a wall. And he's fantastic pictures of them. Amazing.
So Tom, we're on the other side of the runway now. This is, did I say once upon a time it was the longest runway in Europe? Have I repeated myself there? I can't remember what we talked about initially. Yeah. So this would have been one of those emergency runways that the space shuttle would have landed on. That would have been really annoying, of course, because they'd have then had to get it back to America. But they used to put it piggyback on a 747. I remember it was a specially adapted 747, and my dad took me to Stansted Airport to see the space shuttle arrive, the first space shuttle. There were crowds everywhere. It was a huge event. And I've got some pictures of it, and I found some pictures of it recently. And the thing that amazed me the most? No security. So these days, can you imagine the space shuttle on the top of a 747? There would be armed guards, there'd be fenced off, you wouldn't be able to get anywhere near it. There's a photograph of me essentially holding on to the front wheels of the 747. My dad took it underneath this.
So you were actually at the plane?
Yeah.
Oh, right. No, not behind a fence. Oh, right.
No, there was no fence. I can't remember. Maybe my dad had got special tickets. I don't think he would have done. I think it would have been. So you can imagine, once upon a time, right next to us where we're looking now, that would have had these horrible, huge, those massive, what were they? I'll correct myself in a minute and do a bit of a history log for you. But those huge aircraft that took those weapons, terrible. And today, look, it's just bracken and grass and Barney trying to find his way into another pond. Perfect.
For those who were just shouting a moment ago, Strata Fortress, Neil. B-52, Strata Fortress. Yes, that was the name of the giant aircraft, a name as heavy as the machine itself. Not based at Greenham full-time, but often seen big, hulking, nuclear-capable bombers with wings that could scrape the treetops. In fact, I think they did a couple of times. They'd fly in from the US bases for exercises, casting long shadows over Berkshire. But Greenham Common's real nuclear teeth were in trucks. In the early 80s, this became home to nearly 100 ground-launched cruise missiles, GLCMs as they were called, nuclear warheads tucked into anonymous-looking military trucks called TELs, T-E-L, Transporter Erector Launchers. They'd drive out into the countryside during drills, never in the same place twice. A deadly game of mobile chess, no fixed silos, no fixed targets, just quiet roads and hedgeways and weapons that could level cities. And every single week, it was right, a nuclear air raid warning siren was tested here. That sound, rising and falling and pulsing with dread, would be heard in schools, in the high street, and there it was, a reminder that you lived next door to World War III's starting pistol. And of course, not everybody took that lying down. We've mentioned this on the show before. Just outside the fences, the Greenham Peace Camp rose. Dedicated women protesting year after year after year. They sang, they stood in silence, they linked arms around the entire base once. Thousands of people. No phones, no internet, just conviction. And, well, it worked. The missiles left by 1991. Aided, of course, by the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement signed by Reagan and Gorbachev. Those missiles were removed, the tells rolled out, the silos closed, although you'll still see them there today. The threat, for a while at least, was eased. And now you can walk here, like I do often, with you for the Photowalk show. And in some parts it feels like nothing ever existed like the base here. But underfoot, you'll often find pieces of the runway, the bunkers, sealed but watching. And maybe, in the silence, if you pause and think back, you can still hear that siren, just faintly, behind the beautiful birdsong.
A place I've always wanted to visit photographically. And I'm going to be, I'll put my hand up, Tom,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be an utter cliche here
Yeah.
and say I've always wanted to photograph Chernobyl.
Oh, gosh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The incredible pictures made across the years, many of which are echoes of each other, actually. I think it's one of those, it feels like a photographic pilgrimage in many respects. It's one that I'll not be able to make. I can see for the foreseeable future. I certainly wouldn't want to go at the moment. 2022,
Yeah.
you did.
I mainly went to Poland. So I did 3 trips to the border, a town called Przemyśl, where this was very early on after the Russian major invasion, and if you remember all the pictures of the refugees flooding out, mostly women and children on the trains.
Very sad.
And the first time, actually my daughter and I drove a minibus with a charity to deliver the minibus. Shout out to John and the charity, Mad Foundation. Yeah, so we went to the border with a minibus to deliver a minibus and then flew back. And then I signed up with another charity that were driving out to Poland and bringing Ukrainians back to the UK, and I did a couple of trips with them. And then in September 22, I took another minibus out for John called Operation Safe Drop. And at that time, I went into Ukraine. I went to Lviv. This was before the Russians started, sending missiles into the cities of Ukraine. So it wasn't as dangerous as it sounds. So we did an aid drop, basically. We drove right across Ukraine with 4 minibuses full of food and medical aid, close to the front line at the time, but not at it, and I dropped off. Our drop-off was in the city of Zaporizhia, which you've probably heard of on the news now.
Goodness.
Again, I was sort of volunteering for a couple of charities, but as usual, I took my camera with me and took pictures mainly of the refugee families that we were helping. But it was quite an experience, yeah. I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah.
However, pretty soon after I came back, the Russians changed the generals. I can't remember the name of the generals. And the new head of the army or whatever started lobbing these big missiles into the cities, and including Lviv on occasion. So I've not gone back. But John and the charity are still there. They're still doing great work. They're still delivering aid to close to the front. But just, I don't want to take it too dark a turn, but one of the Ukrainian lads that I was in the crew that I was driving with has subsequently been drafted in the army and is dead, missing, presumed dead. One of the American volunteers that I was with, Nick, he was a American paramedic, and he joined up to be a paramedic at the front, and he's been killed as well. Wow. So 2 of the 8 drivers we were with are now died, unfortunately.
There's always a moment after hearing a story like that where the path feels certainly a little quieter, to lose people you've stood alongside, not just in work but in shared belief, in service, will inevitably leave a mark. And hearing how ordinary people step forward not just to help but to defend is humbling, and it certainly reframes everything else. We talk, of course, a lot about photography on this podcast, what it captures, what it preserves. And I mentioned at the start of my conversation with Tom in that segment, before it took a different direction, that I'd been interested to travel to Ukraine and, in particular, Chernobyl. Whilst I know it's been photographed, studied and published 1,000 times and then some, I think I'd harboured this idea or perhaps need to photograph the frozen time of it all. The classroom still with books on desks, that fairground wheel waiting for the next summer that never came, the radioactive ghost of it all. And as we walked together on Greenham Common, I'm reminded that this isn't just a place of protest or airstrips. There's something deeper in the soil. Because long before the cruise missiles, back in 1958, there was also a nuclear accident here. A B-47 bomber slid off the runway and broke apart. Its payload, a nuclear weapon without the trigger core, spilled radioactive material onto the common. According to documentation that's not difficult to find, but challenging to completely corroborate. It was cleaned up, contained, forgotten by most, but it's still a thread between places marked by the potential or reality of catastrophe.
And we're back with Tom very soon. If you'd like to send in your thoughts about photography, what it means to you, perhaps some pictures that you've made of late on your trails, and I'd love to hear from you. The email address to send your pictures, your letters, your thoughts to is, as always, store this one up now, stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. The one-word assignment now. Here comes your challenge for this month. I'll tell you how you can take part in a moment. It's set by a good friend of the show, extra miler Dennis Linden, who over two very, very special editions of the Extra Mile, a month or so ago, perhaps two actually, there were episodes 129 and 130. He told the story of how he, helped by his family, photographically documented a period in his life where, and it was quite recent actually, he had a heart transplant. It is, as you can imagine, quite the story. So your challenge this month is set by Dennis Linden.
The Photowalk assignment.
Dennis, I have the privilege of knowing the word you're going to choose, and I have to say, it is not a word I was expecting. Go on, you do the word and surprise us.
Gear.
Why gear? Because usually I get a nosebleed from that word.
And that's specifically one of the reasons why I chose it, to put you under stress. But also, I have come, I guess, it goes back to that Fujifilm t-shirt where they show that evolution, the Neanderthal, and then the photographer carrying all the gear, and eventually, holding an X100V or whatever it was.
That's it, yeah.
But I think a lot of us have been through this process, especially those who are probably on the Photowalk, of expansion of gear and contraction of gear. And where I am now with my physical problems, I need a small, light, but competent camera to record the documents that I want to create. And I think others are in the same place. And I take photographs, coincidentally, of my gear in specific settings, or gear that I have evolved or chosen for a specific task. And so I think taking a picture of some of your gear, or the minimum amount of gear that you can get away with, in a setting would be what I would like to see. I'd like to see what other people use in anger on a regular basis. You have to get the right bit of gear for the right project. Obviously, my heart diary, although some of it was shot with an Olympus, some of it was shot with a Nikon, some of it was shot with a Ricoh. The vast majority of it was actually shot with one or other version of an iPhone, because you can't exactly carry a lot of camera gear around in a hospital room and get away with it. HIPAA compliance and this, that, and the other thing. So you have to use the gear that works for the circumstances.
Well, that's the word for this month. The word is, you can say it,
gear.
So the best of luck. Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you can, resize them please to 2,500 pixels wide. Otherwise, don't worry, send it full res. I will do the heavy lifting, Send me some thoughts about the picture too, if that helps with the narrative, if it helps to tell more of the story. No watermarks though, please, no borders, but just because it doesn't fit in with the style of that page. But do include links of your social feeds, your website, your Flickr, your Glass, wherever we can enjoy more of your work. The pictures and the stories go onto the assignments page, and some may well also feature on our Photowalk Instagram, which helps get more eyes on your work and also helps our community to grow. Helps us to spread the word of the Photowalk. If you ever get a chance, by the way, BTW, to let friends of yours in photographic communities that I can't reach, so many Facebook groups, for example, please do. Just drop a URL in for photowalk.show and talk a bit about the podcast, if you enjoy my company, of course. Before we return to my walk with Tom Warburton, a very special thank you to arthelper.ai, who support this show. Let me tell you a bit more about them. Friends, and since we mentioned the history of this land I'm walking on, friends and Romans who once walked these Greenham paths, lay down your lorica for a moment and give this a listen, would you? It might just change your photographic life if you want to sell some work.
If you've ever thought about selling your photography online but haven't a clue where to start, I think Art Helper could probably help you because it's made for people like us. Here's how it works. You upload a photo, magically and instantly professional content is made for you, such as social media posts, email newsletters, even full Substack articles, all in your own voice. It can also generate hundreds of mock-ups for every image you upload, things like your work framed so people get a real understanding of what your photograph could look like on their wall. It helps you connect with the right buyers and even suggests pricing based on your market. And unlike most AI tools, it has an art protection guarantee, which means something very important: your images are never used for AI training. Free to try, and Art Helper is giving our listeners a special deal. Go to arthelper.ai, use the code PHOTOWALK and get 30 days free of the pro version. I'll have a link on the show page. It's a great way to start selling your art or growing the business you already have. And thank you, arthelper.ai, for your belief in this show.
There was a question I asked Tom to when we were toing and froing on email and organising meeting up. I said, let's just have some areas of conversation that you feel comfortable with. And he wrote me a question: why walk the Ganges? And it's not a short river, for one. But actually, the story does start back in 1989. You'd read a book by Denison, is it Bewick? Buick about his walk up the Ganges in 1984, not long before that. Yeah. So you know, that idea was there, and you were thinking, oh, this sounds very exotic.
Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, I never thought about it every day, but I had read the book, and this guy, I think Canadian, walked from an island called Gangasagar, which is in the Indian Ocean near Calcutta sort of area. And he'd walked all the way to the source glacier of the Ganges, and he wrote a book about it. And when I was in India, I read it. And then when I retired, I sort of had another read, and I thought, oh, that's a great idea, isn't it? That is a great idea to really get under the skin, or try and get under the skin of India.
And what was the reason this time to make photographs? At this stage, you're thinking, right, National Geo haven't given me quite the commissions I was expecting in my life.
I'll do it anyway.
So I'll go find a place, and I'll do it for myself.
Yeah, a little bit. I just wanted an adventure. I'd spent 30 years of my life driving a desk and becoming an excellent mediocre bureaucrat. And I kind of wanted.
I think that's what I'm going to call. That could be the title of the show. Excellent mediocre bureaucrat. I always think what's going to What's going to make people think, what's that about?
I'm not sure that's clickbait, is it? It's not clickbait.
Anyway, so you'd got used to driving this desk exceptionally well.
Yeah, and it's just in the back of my head. So I thought, I'd really like to do a big adventure. And everyone at work, because I retired when I was 58, so everyone at work was saying, well, why are you retiring? You stay on and, you get a promotion or whatever. And
another 12 years in you.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I've had enough. And I used to start telling people, they go, what are you going to do with your time? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go and walk the length of the River Ganges. And it was a bit of a throwaway line at first. But I thought, maybe I could have a go. So in 2023, I took my daughters to India. We went, and my older daughter and I went trekking to the Source Glacier. Just a little bit of a recce, but also because my daughter Ella and I like walking and trekking. So we went, and when we were there, I met the guide, Surab. We'd booked just a local company to take us into the national park at the top. And Surab is a brilliant guy, absolutely amazing.
I've watched the film, by the way.
Oh, yeah, this was the year before.
Oh, that was the year before. The film that I saw, the guide walks.
Yeah, Surab,
I can only describe it as loosely as a moderate pace for a marathon.
yeah, probably. Yeah, he's a proper climber. He's been to the top of the mountains and.
But this wasn't that man, right? Okay.
Yeah, no, that was Surab. Yeah.
Oh, it was.
So we met Surab Rana, and he'd arranged all the trekking and the licenses and getting into the permits to get into the national park and all this for us. We had tents and all that sort of thing. But he thought he's a quiet mountain man. So unknown to me, he'd invited two of his friends, Indian friends that spoke really good English, just to keep Ella and I company. So we met a lovely, lovely couple called Surab and Ankit. And Ankit was making a video documentary of Surab and about the retreat of the glacier. He was making a sort of documentary, long-term sort of documentary about Surab as a sort of character in this story about the climate change and the glacier. And so my daughter and I became really good friends with Ankit and Serbi. So I stayed in contact with them, and they were quite really encouraging, saying, you could walk the Ganges, you could do it. We'll help. So in 2024, I went back and thought, well, I'll give it a go. But I didn't think I could do it all. It would take 6 months to walk. It's 2,550 kilometres, something like that. I couldn't do it. That would take 6 months. And I thought,
which in pounds, shillings and goats per square inch is how many miles?
1,900 miles, something like that. Yeah, it's a long way.
It'll take you a while.
It takes a while, yeah. In between the time, I'd found out that this big festival, the Markumbela, which we might talk about in a minute.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, that was going to happen at Allahabad, which has now got its Hindi name Prayagraj, in January 25. So it's about halfway down the Ganges, and I thought, well, I could do half. It would take me about, I thought, sort of 10, 12 weeks, and that would give me a target to walk to. And as my daughter says, that's half an anecdote, Dad. I went and walked half the Ganges. That's not an anecdote. But that was what I thought I could do. So I went back with Ankit and Serbi and Surab, and we went back to the glacier, and then I set off with them and walked right from the front of the glacier all the way down through the Himalayas, down to, those of you that have been to India might know about Rishikesh, where the Beatles ashram is.
Oh, right, yes.
So walked down there, and then Haridwar, the next town, is a very intense Hindu pilgrimage site. And then right across the plains, across the rural plains, and then eventually where the River Ganges meets the Yamuna, which is the river that goes past the Taj Mahal. Oh, you'll have seen it on your trip.
We were next to that river.
You would be on the other side of the Yamuna, yeah. So those two rivers join at what was called Allahabad, Prayagraj. And I walked to the confluence point where the rivers meet.
Where they join.
Yeah, where they join.
Yeah. We're going towards this seat, by the way, because this seat, there's various things on this walk that Barney knows.
Okay. And
this seat is one. He doesn't necessarily want to sit, but he knows this is the place for treats.
Okay. Well, Barney.
So we got to the confluence.
Yeah. So I walked. It took me 54 days in the end.
Wow. That's not bad going.
Yeah.
1,100 kilometres.
Yeah, 1,100 kilometres in 54 days. I have to say,
that's not half an anecdote. That's a proper effort.
Yeah. I don't tell my daughter that. She goes, "You've only done half of it, Dad. Shut up."
Kids are so cruel, aren't they? I noticed she wasn't there for this 1,100 kilometre walk.
To be fair to her, she'd done the first. first bit.
Go on. Right, hang on. Hold on to that thought. While you're doing well, Barney. It's a hot day. I'll get you some water in a second. I brought some with me. Brought some in a flask, one of the older show flasks. We found one of the new ones for Tom. He's got the famous, not so famous flask. I noticed today, I've got a few to send to America, but I got a mail saying that you can't send them so easily now.
Oh, there's a tariff.
Well, it's not so much the tariff. There's some other thing to do with stopping low-value items. So at the moment, it might be quicker for all my American friends, and we have many, and I'm always very thankful. Look at this, pups. This is like a veritable meal. No, you don't put your own nose, in the tin. Yeah, for our American friends.
Oh, so you can't send them?
Yeah, well, do you know what? It might just give me an excuse just to fly to America, and we'll have a meet-up point, and I'll take a pile of merch. Yeah. As the youth say.
Yeah, that's right.
And we'll all meet. Where's the central point in America? What's the central? I was thinking the central point. My geography's not working here, and I know all my American friends are now saying it's da-da-da, Neil. If I was doing a central point in the UK, I'd probably say, well, not the UK necessarily. If it was England, I'd probably say Birmingham. That's not the central point. What's the central point of the UK? Because I always think this, when I go to the Scottish retreat, I drive up from, it's not even the south coast, it's just west of London, Newbury. And I drive and I get to the sign that says, welcome to Scotland. Yeah. And then I've got the same amount to go again just to get to Inverness. I don't know what the central point, what's the central point in America? That's where we could meet. I'll just bring a load of flasks with me.
He's flogging merch, everyone.
Well, I'm not flogging it. It's free. Oh dear. Right, Ganges. In fact, hold that thought for a second, because I want to tell you a little bit about the Ganges.
The Ganges isn't just a river; it's a living goddess to millions. It flows from the Himalayas right down to the Bay of Bengal, nourishing life, belief, and culture all the way. More than 400 million people live along its basin. It's bathed in, prayed to, cremated beside, and scientifically, it's quite the enigma. The Ganges has been found to contain bacteriophages, viruses that infect bacteria, which some scientists believe may help purify its waters naturally. So, despite carrying levels of pollution that should make it biologically hostile, the river has real pockets of resilience. Almost self-cleaning, sort of, sacred and scientific, all at once. And another strange Ganges fact, well, at least 100 species of fish and over 90 types of amphibians call it home, including a blind dolphin. Yes, the Ganges River dolphin is both toothless and nearly blind, navigating by sonar in waters that are more myth than map, perhaps. It's a river, certainly, where science, spirituality, and a fair bit of the surreal flow side by side.
I'm very envious that you had such a long walk. Perhaps I may not have felt like that as I was walking. I would have thought, whose idea was this? Yeah. Couldn't we have had an all-terrain... Oh, hang on. Morning. Couldn't we have had an all-terrain tuk-tuk and done it? But I'm very envious in particular of the fact you were able to stop and talk to people along the way, because India is probably one of the warmest countries that I've photographed in when it comes to making portraits of people.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the, I'm post-rationalising this, but one of the things I wanted to do was sort of got away from the tourist areas. And I've been to the Taj Mahal, and I've been to Delhi, and I've been to Varanasi and all that. And if anyone's thinking of going with Neil, do. It's brilliant. But that's not all of India. You tend to go to the bigger cities or the temples. But I kind of wanted to go to an area that it didn't really get many tourists. So the area of the Himalayas I went to, Rishikesh gets quite a lot of European and American tourists because of the yoga sort of festivals and stuff. Yeah. But up in the Himalayas, it's actually an Indian pilgrimage area. There's 4 temples up in the top of the Himalayas there, which are revered, and it's called the Char Dams. You go to each of the temples, and back in the day, you walk it. I met people that were walking these 4 temples. And then when I got on the plains, the first bit of the plains, so from Haridwar to Kanpur, it was very remote, rural communities just farming rice and sugarcane and mangoes, particularly potatoes, aloo in Hindi. So areas that no tourist goes to, no Western tourist goes to, and so you're walking through villages that they just usually the old guys that were at the chai shop in the morning would just look at you like, what the hell are you doing here? Yes. As this sort of 6 foot tall, skinny white guy walks through their village in the morning, and they just sort of shake their head. But I'd made, sort of on the spur of the moment, Serbi and I made a little video on my iPhone, and Serbi did it in Hindi to say, this is Tom, he's my friend, he's a nice guy sort of thing. He's walking down the Ganges.
What a great idea.
And he's taking photographs of people, and if you wouldn't mind, could you take a photo?
Yeah.
And it was about, a couple of minutes long little video on my iPhone. So I couldn't speak Hindi very well. They couldn't, mostly the older guys community couldn't speak English. But I had this little video. So I'd sit in the chai shop, hand the phone across, and it'd get passed round. And then, one guy would have listened to it and then tell all his mates. And, before you knew it, there was a crowd. And that just resulted in almost everyone I met saying, oh, take my picture, take my picture, take my picture. So it just worked really well. In the Himalayas and the first bit of the plains, it was brilliant. When I got to Kanpur, I was getting tired, and also I didn't realise it, but the Grand Trunk Road, which goes all the way from Bangladesh to, historically goes all the way to Afghanistan, right across India. It's like their equivalent of the A1 or what would be American Route 66. Sort of, it's the main transcontinental road. And it joins, I sort of met it at Kanpur. So from Kanpur to Prayagraj, it's like quite a lot of the day was walking along the sort of hard shoulder of the A1M or something.
Wow.
It's not very nice. So that bit I can see on my Lightroom thing, I just dropped off taking photographs really. And I just got my head down and wanted to get it finished. Just powered through. But the earlier times, just amazing, wandering through a farm or a village and just everyone completely blanked about why you were there.
I found Google Translate in India. Well, I'd not used it before. I knew of the tool, but I'd not used it. Get with a plot, Grandad, my kids would say to me. But we used that quite a lot, and we would speak into it. It would the app, that is, would speak out in Hindi, and then whoever we were talking to would respond. It's quite an elongated conversation, it does, but it works quite well.
Yeah, it just stretch it out a bit. Yeah.
Morning.
I had one of the advantages I had if I got into trouble. And by trouble, I mean, I was never felt threatened or anything. It was usually that a hotel wouldn't let me stay because I was a foreigner and they didn't know what to do with me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right.
But I had Serbi and Ankit on speed dial, and if I hadn't had their backup, they walked with me for the trek, and then Ankit came with me for sort of 3 or 4 days after that, and then I set off on my own.
So a reasonable amount of time on this journey. You were on your Todd, as we say.
Four. I think Ankit and Serbi did like the first 10 days, something like that. Yeah. So, and then I did 40 odd just by myself walking across the plain.
That is a really good example of just how friendly that country is, that you feel confident enough in a country that, culturally we have ties, but culturally you're like a fish out of water when you're on your own in a country where English isn't necessarily, and certainly in the parts you're walking, English isn't necessarily a first or even used language in some villages.
Yeah, I think the thing I would say, and I've told lots of my friends this, is India in this century is going to be amazing, because every morning I'd set off early, I'd get up at 5:30, leave at 6, and try and get a couple of hours walking before the sun got too high. Yeah. And that period of time overlapped with the sort of school run, basically. Yeah. So every morning I'd see hundreds and hundreds of bright, young, well-fed kids, well-dressed, coming out of farms or shops or wherever they were, where their parents, weren't poor, but they were not wealthy, and they were going to school, and English medium schools. And every day I'd see hundreds, and then the next morning I'd see another 500, and then the next morning I'd seen another 500, and that cohort of people, you know, are all speaking English, well educated. It's just amazing.
I bet you were great entertainment in the mornings during the school run.
I usually got, I think, half my
who's the big friendly giant over there in the cap?
Well, I think about half of my very small Instagram following are teenage Indian lads who meet on the way, and they want you to follow back, you know, follow them and follow back, and you know, take a picture of them and then post it so that they think they're going to be famous in the UK with basically my family and friends. But
we talk a lot about thinking time and photography. You have the ultimate thinking time with your camera, with your walking boots. Barney, don't stop there. You're right in the middle of us. There we go. What were your share with me what the sort of things that you thought about that accompanied you on the journey?
I'll just appear very shallow, because mostly I was thinking, where am I going to get my next meal? Oh God, my leg hurts, and I hope there's a chai shop in the next 5 kilometres or whatever. A lot of the time you're thinking about the task, because you were out. I was really, for a tourist, very remote. I mean, obviously nowhere in India is particularly remote, but from people, there's always people there, so that if you had an accident or a car crash or something like that, someone would be there to help. You're never very far from anyone. But a lot of the time you're just thinking about, right, how far have I got to go? You know, where am I going to eat? Where am I going to do this? And who's going to be the next portrait victim, as I refer to them. So I'm not too philosophical about it. But it was that's partly why I contacted you. It's a pretty extreme photo walk, and it was just brilliant to do. And remember, you know, just talking about it now, it's amazing. I can't think that I did it. I just cannot believe I did it. You've seen a little bit of video when I got there.
I know.
And I got to the finish, and I was like, I just can't believe I've done it.
I thought of the ending. It's not completely the same, but I did think of the ending as a little bit like one of my favourite films, Forrest Gump, where he says, I ran, and one day, I can't remember the lines, I just stopped running. And he stopped, and he turned around, and he walked back again.
Yeah. Well, it was like that. I got there, and there was no one to greet me that knew what I'd done.
No big finishing line.
No red, tape or
not
anything.
even your daughter.
No, there was no one there.
Had you done the whole thing, of course, he might have turned up. But you only did half an anecdote, remember?
Yeah, exactly. I only done half of it. So I got there, and there was some Indian lads there that were at the local college asking me, you know, what you're doing here, because it was unusual to be sat on the sandbank basically at this. What are you doing here? And I goes, oh well, I've just walked from the glacier, and they just looked at me like, you've done what? Everyone knows it's you know that the Ganges is a goddess. It's seen in Hindu mythology. The river is a goddess, and the Yamuna is as well. But so they all know. All the Hindus know about Gomukh, which is the glacier front, and they all know about Gangotri and the temples. You know, it's part of the mythology of Hinduism and their culture. So if you said, oh, I've just walked from Gangotri, they knew, well, you've done what? You know,
doesn't compute.
It just didn't compute. And then I'd say I'd learnt a little bit of Hindi, which was Ganga Yatra, which is a Ganga pilgrimage or Ganga journey, and then I'd say Gangotri to Prayagraj, and they'd look at me and, did you get the bus or whatever? And I'd go, no, we're walking. It's Chalana, his walk. And then they'd go, paddle, 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 which is his feet. And they'd just look at me like, he walks. It's for the sadhus. We'll probably come on to talking about sadhus, but for the sadhus and for very religious Hindus, that pilgrimage has historically been very important to walk to the source of the Ganges. But I was going the other way, so they kind of computed that was a thing to do. But why would a Westerner do it? So it was it wasn't an anticlimax, because I was really glad to finish, but I'd got to the confluence, and then I've finished now, I'll go back to the hotel.
We'll call that your Gump moment. Mar Kumbh Mela. Now, actually, there's a not-so-exotic title if you translate that into English.
Yeah, my rough translation, it means Big Pot Festival.
Big Pot Festival.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Kumbh
The Big Pot Festival.
I can tell you the reason why. Hindu mythology is that during the creation period, the gods and the demons had a fight over a pot which was full with Amrit, which in Hindi is the elixir of life.
Yeah.
And they fought over this pot, and 4 drops fell to earth, one at Prayagraj, one at Haridwar, one at Ujjain, and one at Najin, I think it's called. 4 cities in India. And these cities host the Kumbh Mela every 12 years on a 12-year rotation.
Fabulous story.
Yeah.
And that's the 12-year rotation, right?
That's the 12-year rotation. And
Yeah.
it's 12 years because Jupiter takes 12 years to go around the sun.
Yep.
So once every 12 years, it enters the star constellation of Aquarius, which is the pot. So Jupiter enters the constellation, the skies. And so every 12 years, that's particularly auspicious. And the belief, my understanding of the belief, is that the rivers of the Ganges then become Amrit at that moment. So they bathe in the river because it is the nectar of the gods, the Amrit, the elixir of life. At that point, that's on a 12-year cycle. But obviously, every 144 years is the 12 years of the 12 years.
Yeah.
So once every 144 years, there's the Kumbh Mela, the big pot festival.
The big one, right.
And that only happens every 144
We've
years.
missed it for the next trip then.
Yeah, I'm afraid, if you didn't go. So the last one was in 1881.
Yes.
And the next one is whatever, 2000, whatever, I can't work the maths out. Now, I've read up a bit about this, did a bit of research about it, and there's some, post-rationalisation, I think, and there's a professor at Oxford or Cambridge, who's a kind of expert in the history of yoga, says actually the Kumbh Mela was kind of made up during the British period because
I'm not sure I want to hear this bit.
well, I think the confluences and the religious bathing in the rivers are very ancient, like 5, 6. It's like us worshipping Greek gods,
Right.
They're very ancient, and Hindu. One of the fascinating things about India is that all the religions, but particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, is very ancient and still practiced. It's no doubt mutated and changed, but it's an amazing deep history. But the actual gathering at the Kumbh Melas, James Mallinson, I think he's called, Professor James Mallinson, he says that during the British period, the British didn't want to interfere with religious issues.
No.
They just wanted to tax everyone and take the money, So they will allow religious festivals to happen, but they wouldn't allow other gatherings to happen because they didn't want it to be sort of a place for a rebellion. Or disease control, actually, going back to the COVID discussion. If you got a big gathering of people, you might get a cholera outbreak. But the Hindu priests argued that this was a religious thing, and that every 12 years we always meet, and we need therefore. So they allowed it to happen. This 12-year cycle and bathing in the rivers. I mean, there's ritual bathing in the rivers all the time, but particularly at these points in time, is a huge cultural thing in India.
Yeah.
And so this Kumbh Mela was only going to happen once in the 144 years, so it was absolutely huge. They planned for 400 million people to visit.
400 million?
400 million people to visit.
My word.
And they've now estimated that there was 660 million separate visits, but some of them were people going twice over 45 days. So it was absolutely huge. The big days, the big bathing days, what they call the royal bathing days, there was sort of 40 million people on site, which I think in the piece I sent to you, I said was 200 Glastonburys.
Yeah.
So, it's on a scale that you cannot imagine.
When you look at that number of people, I assume it's a sea of faces.
The site is huge. The site was 4,000 hectares, which is 40 square kilometres.
Right.
It's all the banks of the Ganges, and they basically build a city on the sandbanks on the edge of the Ganges and the Yamuna. and they lay roads out, and they put in street lights and internet connection and toilets everywhere, and they build police stations and hospitals and schools, everything. They build it all in about 6 or 8 weeks, and then they have the festival, and then they take it all down again before the monsoon.
I'd want that contract. Mind you, that is only every 144 years. So.
Yeah, it's not a good business model. No, it's every 12 years. So,
but not the big one, though.
Yeah, not the big one. But it's still huge, even on the normal things. But this one was particularly auspicious, and it's mainly a bathing festival, so people bathe in the river at the auspicious time. But all the sadhus gather, the Hindu ascetics or monks or saints, depending on your translation. Normally you don't get a big gathering of the sadhus. They live in the Himalayas, or they live in an ashram, or they're in their own small groups, but this is the point at which they all gather. So there's a number of different akaras, different groups. It's probably the best translation of sadhus, and they all gather. And it's the place at which, if you want to become a sadhu, it's the place the initiation ceremony happens.
A sadhu being?
A Hindu ascetic, Hindu religious ascetic monk.
Yeah.
So you'll have seen photographs, famous, particularly in Varanasi.
Well, we've got a picture on the India 26 page of a sadhu who is in. Well, there's 2 pictures actually. There's one reclining back on a boat, and there's one sitting up in a boat.
Yeah. So it's particularly Varanasi. They hang out at Varanasi.
Varanasi visit.
Yeah. So the sadhus come to the Kumbh Mela in really big numbers. I think Juna Akara, which is one of the biggest sort of sect brotherhoods, I think there's about 40,000, something like that. And for pilgrims, for normal villagers, normal Hindu pilgrims, it's a chance to meet. They really, really, if they're religious, they really believe that these are living saints, and they take blessings from them. And the Naga sadhus are the naked warrior monks. The Naga sadhus give up all worldly possessions, including their clothes, and wander around naked. But they're also the warriors. They're sort of warriors of, say the Juna Akara. I'll have a load of Naga sadhus that are there. But in the past, they were active warriors.
They're often covered in ash, aren't they?
Yeah.
What's the significance of that?
The sadhus sit in front of a fire, a holy fire, and they'll bring that with them, called a duni. And they keep the fire burning all the time, and the sadhus will use ash from that holy fire to cover themselves. But in Varanasi, when you go to Varanasi, there's the cremation ghats, and some of the sadhus will use the cremation ash to cover themselves, particularly the Agori, and they sort of dispense with all cultural norms, really. And I got because I couldn't.
We're going this way, by the way.
I couldn't find the camp because the site's so huge. I couldn't find the Agori, and I was trying to find different subjects.
Yeah.
So I met a guide, an Indian guide, a like government trained guide, and said, "Oh, I couldn't find me the Agori," and he said, "Yeah, I know where they are," and he took me, and we went into the Agori camp. So I had an Indian translator with me, and he asked, was it all right if I took some photographs? And the younger lads, the Agori, said, "Oh, yeah, that'd be great." And I had the printer, so I'd give them a print.
Oh, you took a printer with you?
I took one of those Fuji instant printers. That's brilliant.
Super tip there.
Oh, no, top tip. I'll tell you about that in a minute, yeah. Went into the Agori camp, did a few pictures of the more junior thing, and then the big boss came out and found out what was going on, and that this Westerner was in the camp. And he told my guide, "Right, one more picture and then you leave." And my guide was pushing me, and I didn't understand what had been said. So I took a picture of the boss, Agori, gave him a print, and then, the guide basically said, "Right, we've got to leave now." So, okay.
Well, hold that thought on the printing. I want to come back to your photographic tip on that. I'm glad you're here, by the way. It sounded like a moment where you may not have been. With where we are now, by the way, so we've. You might have noticed that Barney took a sharp left and started pulling me.
Where he's going for the bacon.
No, yes, he knows that there's 2 coffee shops here. There's the expensive one, and then there's the not so expensive one. I prefer the not so expensive one, not for the food, but for the fact that it's well, there is that. I'm buying, by the way. It's more for the fact that it puts money directly into the trust that look after the grounds. So, but Barney likes the more expensive one. The bacon apparently is better, and more of it. So we're heading this way. So hold on to your, because we're going to head through the more industrial part of Greenham Common here, which is now home to many businesses. Actually, we'll head through this gate. There's a few interesting things to see here, actually. Maybe I'll tell you about these places. We touched on this, but I'm thinking of starting it'll be a voluntary thing. Yeah, there we go, that gate. Of doing historic photo walks up here. I've got to talk to my friend Giles about this, to do historic photo walks of the airbase. What's in front of us here, this is one of the main control centres. It looks a bit more military, doesn't it? But on the left, you're about to see the armoury.
Oh, right.
So if you look across there, that's the armoury, which is just a square building. I assume, yes, a bunker. So what's above, there's a lot more below. And I don't know this bit for sure, but I've been told this by somebody who runs the trust, that underneath is the real air traffic control.
Oh, okay.
So you've got the air traffic control tower, which is a bit of a beacon of "Hello, come get me."
Yeah.
And there's the
false target.
There's the one that would have been used. Oh, doesn't bear thinking about, does it? But that's the armoury. So, and this whole industrial area is it's a very successful industrial area, actually, on what was the airbase. Right in front of us, of course, that would have been where one of the hangars was. It is no longer a hangar. It's been rebuilt as a building that now hosts what I call the chutney factory.
Oh, yes.
Can you smell it?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, it's not as... On some days, and we're talking about India. I love Indian food now, and chutney is always something I associate with beautiful Indian food. There are days here where, particularly on a Friday, where I've got home and the decision for tea has been made by smelling the chutney factory on my walk around. But we're going to make our way towards the coffee shop. Look, he's happy now. There's no barking now. So we've discovered there's half the world's population in one place. I know that's a slight exaggeration, but there's was it 40 million?
On the big days.
More than 40, 400
million visitors over the whole period.
I always used to get my zeros in the wrong place. This is why I did not get my maths O level to the grade specified. So 400 million people, you're at the festival.
Yeah.
Tell me about the photography of this amazing event.
Yeah, so on the days where it wasn't the special bathing days, I used to you had to walk a long way. The site's huge, as I described. But I tend to go to the Juna Akara area, and the sadhus would sit round their holy fires, giving blessings to people. Yeah. And loads and loads of Indian and foreign tourists taking photographs and everything. They're happy to have the photograph taken. I'd taken my little printer as well, so I could take...
Oh, this was the top tip.
Top tip, yeah. Top tip is I took a Fuji Eco, whatever they're called, printer, instant printer, and I used to take the picture with my iPhone and then just print it out and give it to whoever I'd photographed. And it makes it a much more balanced kind of exchange rather than you taking a picture. You're kind of giving as well.
How many rolls of film or packets of film did you have?
I took about maybe 100 sheets of film, something like that, but I didn't use it all the time. I used it when I thought it was good. Yeah. I mean, a classic example was try and do this in a clean manner. One of the tricks this Naga Sadhu was using, he'd wrapped his penis around a sword and then was holding it because that's his little trick. Yeah. Anyway, I took a photograph of him, printed it out, gave it to him, and he basically indicated stay there, and he went off and got his mate, and his next trick was to wrap his penis around a bamboo cane, kind of hold it on his thighs, and then his mate stood on the bamboo cane and held his arms out, can only be described as spectacle, and then print that out for him. And of course, once you turned up as a Westerner doing that, you gather a crowd of Indian pilgrims around you as well, and it all becomes a bit chaotic. Yeah, the sadhus have all, not all, but some of them have got tricks and they're giving blessings, but also some of them do austerities. So probably one of the most photographed and known austerities is some sadhus will put their arm in that air and leave it in the air for years, and it sort of atrophies, their arm gets stuck there. You know, eventually, I mean, one of the guys had his arm up in the air for 15 years and it sort of atrophied and the hand had sort of got no muscle left on it at all. Yeah. And that's seen as, you know, a great act to usually Shiva, so the god Shiva. And therefore, the pilgrims just see this person as a saint. The other one is the standing sadhus, so they'll not ever sit down. And they have a sort of sling that they lean on, but they won't ever sit down.
So usually sleep like that, that's their entire day.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
Okay.
And usually these things are on the 12-year cycle. So Moni Baba, who I'd met at the glacier, he runs the ashram at the top near the glacier, he'd been silent, never speaks for 12 years. And that Moni means silent, so silent. Moni Baba means silent Baba, which is another name for a sadhu. So, and quite a lot of these austerities are on 12-year cycles. You commit to doing it for 12 years. And some do it for longer. So there's lots of this thing. So I photographed quite a lot of the sadhus. And then on the first Royal Bathing Day, which was the morning of the 14th of January, I'd hooked up with a guide friend of mine, a photographer, an Indian photographer who I'd met in Varanasi the year before. We went to the Royal Bathing Day together. And that was the first time I'd really been in the big crowd. And, you know, it's pretty intense. I mean, it's absolutely packed. And getting into the right position with your camera was really quite tricky. But because I was with Manjit, and he's quite assertive about it and could speak Hindi and that, we managed to get ourselves actually underneath the press tower, because we figured that the press would have the best location. So if we stood underneath the press tower, we would be in a good location. And then eventually we ran across, sort of beat the police line and ran across and managed to get into the area that had been reserved and was free from the crowd. So we got in right pole position. And that was what an experience. So the Naga sadhus come down first and they're just exhilarated with sort of religious zeal, because they've been waiting for this moment for 144 years. And they sort of parade down to the Sangam and bathe, take their ritual bath. I didn't get to the waterside that day. I just was about 100 metres away, but got some great photographs of them coming through, and just the noise and the experience is just extreme, you know. Even for Indians, I have to probably say that, you know, India is a very modern country. There's lots of businesses and billionaires in Mumbai and all of that. So this is, even for Indians, this was quite a, you know, once in a lifetime thing to go to be able to bathe in the Ganges at this particular moment. So a lot of the pilgrims are, you know, the best day of their life sort of thing. So it's quite extreme kind of India. Anyway, got some good photographs there. And then I would spend the next sort of 2 weeks. That was on the full moon, and then 2 weeks later is the new moon, and there was another Royal Bathing Day. And that day I was just by myself, so I walked onto the site, and the crowds were just unbelievable. I mean, you couldn't walk. There was millions and millions and millions of people trying to get down to the Sangam. And I got down, but the crowd, you literally couldn't sit down. There was people sat and lied on the floor, and you couldn't walk, you couldn't go anywhere. So I turned around. It was the time I just thought, this is too much for me. And I turned around, I went back, and I sort of camped. I just slept out on the ground near one of the police stations, sort of temporary police stations. So the third bathing day was my last chance to get to the waterside, because I was coming home after that. So I changed my tactics a bit, and I went down just in the morning. I didn't stay overnight. I just walked in and sort of early in the morning. Got in this huge crowd again, and they'd changed the layout. So although I got used to the site and I knew where to go, they'd changed the sort of flow of the people, and I just couldn't get to Media Tower, which is, I was trying to get to the Media Tower again. Anyway, I was obviously looking bewildered, and the policeman looked at me and he went, "Excuse me, sir, where are you trying to get to?" And I did cheat. I waved my posh camera at them and went, "Press." And it said, "Follow me, sir." Took me through the barriers, took me across this massive crowd, through the barriers, got his police mates to open the barriers and let me through into the press area. So I sort of blagged my way in. And then about 5 minutes later, the massive parade of sadhus started, and I ended up in pole position right at the front. So partly it's, having the guts to try, and partly a bit of luck.
Well, bravado is important when you are on tour. I've learned this myself, being a media man many years ago, that sometimes that word press, I've only had a press card once in my life, and I tell you what, I used it. Yeah,
I kind of, with hindsight, wish I'd gone, BBC, it's BBC.
Let me just tell you, that's not quite the passport it once was in some parts of the world. So it was, what an adventure. Then you flew home. It's a bit like, It's another Gump moment, and then I came home.
3 weeks at the biggest festival that's ever happened in the world.
How did you how did you come down off that? Because Sam said to me the other day, she said, I think it took you more than a month to sort of, I just saw it in your eyes that you were still there.
You kind of reminisced about it, and we joked earlier that my family are probably sick of the anecdotes. My kids, I go, "Oh, when I was in India," and they kind of roll their eyes at you. I go, "Oh, here we go, Dad, another anecdote." So,
perhaps this way.
It's difficult to explain to people what the experience, both the walk and the festival, was like. I have made a bit of a video. And I'm giving a talk next Saturday at a local conservation charity and stuff. So I've tried to do a bit and explaining here today. But you can never really get it across. Yeah. I mean, I guess you hope the photographs get it across. You suggested to me, actually, that I added sound to the website.
Yes.
And I've just discovered how to do it this week. And I've managed to, I made some recordings.
Are you on Squarespace?
No.
No, okay.
No, I'm on Portfolio Box or whatever it's called.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, so because I did that little piece for you, that little postcard, I did take more audio recordings.
I felt like I'd set you homework.
Yeah. No, it's really good. It did make me think about the sound and the atmosphere rather than the stills. So I made quite a lot of recording of bands and the music and the background. So I've now managed to add those to the website so that when you go to the page about the Mark Umbamella photographs, you can press play at the beginning and it'll play you a little soundtrack of actually it's a band.
Yeah.
But it just adds a little something, doesn't it, the audio? Yeah.
I think audio is really important for moments like that. I've been thinking about how I could possibly do an audio-only course going back to India. I had this idea of being in the marketplaces and come on, pups, this way. Being in the marketplaces and putting a stool down, one of those fold-out stools, and telling the story through your words, journaling and sound. It's a bit specialist, I think.
Yeah, but you did make me think about the audios, and I had a little GoPro thing, action cam, so I did quite a lot of videos, and I can clip the sounds off that. But I also just recorded, particularly artis. We haven't talked about the artis. Every night, to honour the goddess Ganges, all the way down the river, actually, at various points, there's arti, which is like a prayer ceremony at sunset and at dawn. I think you'll probably do them when you go to Varanasi.
I know, we also did them in Delhi, the very first day in Delhi, by the Yamuna.
By the Yamuna, yeah. So at sunset there's a prayer ceremony with ghee lamps and prayer meetings. That both visually and audio-wise is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah. That they honour the river as a goddess every day at dawn and sunset. It's just what a brilliant thing.
Lovely.
What a brilliant thing.
Wow, what an adventure. What an adventure. It's been a real privilege, Tom, to and we went for a bacon butty.
We did.
And I introduced you to the man who essentially, I always say flippantly to him, is very, very big person in Newbury because he runs all of this.
The trust.
Where the trust, as far as you see, that man we met.
Yeah. Really.
Very, very smart guy. And I said to Chris, I said, this is Tom, who's walked the whole of India. Only half an anecdote. That really could be the name of the podcast, you know. Anyway, all these fantastic adventures. You've been on so many others that we haven't talked about today, but we've covered quite a lot of photographic ground with you. I think it's fantastic, you know, to meet, and this is my open invite to you. If you've been to some special places, come take a walk. This is what the Photowalk podcast is all about. Yes, we have some tremendously well-known photographers that talk with us, and that's always an absolute joy, in particular for me. But equally, it's fantastic to talk with photographers like what I is, to use my footballification language, to talk about our lives and the adventures that we take. So, you know, you may well think, I've got a story to tell Neil. Would you like to come to Greenham Common? We can take a walk. Right, that's given you long enough to tell me two things. First of all, next adventure.
Yeah. Well, I haven't really got another adventure planned, as I've talked to Neil about. My mum's quite ill at the moment, so not going to go far from home.
Yeah.
However, we discussed, I want to do a more of a long documentary thing about the agriculture and farming in I live in Cumbria.
Oh, right. Okay.
So,
we were talking about James Revilius. Yeah.
So I'd quite like to do that. I spent one of the summers going to all the agricultural shows. So do something more local, basically.
Yeah.
As for long adventures, long hauls, probably put them on pause. I'd love to go back to Gambia.
Maybe we could go together.
Maybe we could go together, yeah. I'd love to go back, actually, and I'd like to go into Senegal as well, which I didn't do. When
there's a draw for me, those two countries.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, so nothing planned at the moment, but hopefully do a bit more locally.
Yeah. Watch this space. Tom said to me, you're not going to ask me the why question, are you? And I said, yes, I am. So, come on.
Okay.
All these amazing adventures. Hold on, I don't know where Barney's going. Barney, this way, come on. Yeah, it's a small little, is that called a copse? A copse? He's gone off because he knows there's a restaurant that way. But, which gives us just about long enough for you to share with me your why.
Yeah, so I think I'll try and answer this on behalf of all the sort of enthusiastic amateurs out there.
Yeah.
In that, I've never made money out of photography. I think I've only sold one set of photographs in my entire life, but I love it. And I think my why is I love the interaction with people. I love taking pictures now of people. I didn't always do that. But it's an enthusiasm, and it doesn't have to be a professional trade, is what I was saying. And we've discussed, haven't we, Neil, that there are some people that spent their whole lives, I think we discussed Ashington and Critchlow earlier, spent their whole lives photographing their particular community and in his case, it was his dads and his uncles and everything. And just stuck at it because that's what they enjoyed doing, and that, they were very good at it, and they never looked for stardom or for money. So I would say I do it just because I love it, and I do enjoy the travel element of it as well. It's a kind of an excuse to go and walk down the Ganges, because that's a stupid thing to do, apart from if you were taking photographs, I have to say. So you kind of make up your own adventure. So on behalf of all the sort of amateur enthusiasts out there, just keep doing stuff and enjoy doing it. Don't worry about whether or not you're famous or, got a book or whatever. Just do it for yourself.
And my sincere thanks this week to Tom Warburton. Absolute joy to spend time with you, Tom. It really was. I really enjoyed our time together. And it's great to meet up with photographers from our community that have these superb photographic and life stories. It really is. We didn't do a lot of photography, I have to say, although I think Tom got a few pictures of me reading the Riot Act to Sir Barkalot when he wouldn't let us talk a couple of times. But apart from that, we just chatted, didn't we, Tom? Chat. And that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday, I have a great PS for you, by the way, in a moment. Oh, I really do. A throw forward to the PS. I even bought a book after reading a bit more about the person I'm about to tell you about after the song. Where were we? Yes, if you can't wait until next Friday and you'd like to walk a little further together, then that's what the Extra Mile edition is all about. We're up to number 138. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you. This week, Mark Fernley returns. The street photographer from last week returns to share 3 more photographic tips in 3 more stops, and Valerie Jardin has a Teach Me Street just for our patrons.
On this week's Extra Mile.
Obviously, you just keep on shooting because you always hit blocks, you know, when I was doing the painting and everything, it's just like you get to a stage where you think, what am I going to do now? And everyone goes through that, you know, where you hit that wall.
It's so important to take that time to spend with friends, share our passion for photography, and not watch the news, not read the news, just share little bits of good news every day. And it worked.
If you go to the website and follow the link that says Extra Mile, or the orange support button, orangey, yellowy orange, you get to listen to 5 minutes of the show for free. PS to the show is to come. As I said, it's a good one this week. It's a good one every week. But this had me buying a book. But before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to or think about what's been said today. And I'm very happy because one of my favourite artists, Ziv Moran, has a new song out. And I do love his voice, I really do. Probably because I really love Paul Simon's voice as well. The two of them, I could listen to them all day. I also like this song called High Time because when you consider today's theme of adventure and finding adventure, lines like flowers in the plenty colouring in the view, red sunburns late Sunday afternoon, talking for hours about the places we've gone and things we've done and the things still to come. That really does resonate with today's show. This will be with my AirPods in on my Walking by the Ganges playlist, without a doubt.
I call to the mountain, sitting across the bay. Morning comes always steadier than yesterday. I'll take the stillness as a sign to write a song about things we've done and the things still to come. Flowers in the plenty, colouring in the view. Red sunburns late Sunday afternoon. Talking for hours about the places we have gone and things we've done and the things still to come. Cause it's high time, high time, high time, high time. Old trees with orange leaves, they take me to a place. I'd be by your side, I would run all night and day. Tall pines and fall lines, I'm glad that we are home. And time with you, I would never outgrow. Cause it's high time, high time, high time,
Ziv Moran, a song called High Time. Just a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together. A safe place to share our thoughts about this thing we do, photographing and walking. As extra milers, you do so much more than support the show with your kind donations. You provide belief, and that's a really important and precious thing. It really is. I didn't mention, although it's probably obvious, that Tom Warburton's pictures, or some of his pictures, there would be truly pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of it otherwise. But some of the pictures that represent Tom's photographic life will, of course, be on the show page today. A few other mentions. For those who smooth the voyage, for me, my thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT. When your tech says no, our head of IT says, I can fix that. And he can help you too if you drop me a message. I'll link you two together. My thanks also to Andrea Gilpin, who keeps a wonderful watchful eye over Instagram, as does Kelly Mitchell for Facebook, and to Michael Mixon, who helps with show research. Write a postscript for the show. I should have asked Tom for one. Thinking about this, shouldn't I? I wonder what a retired mediocre bureaucrat might say. I still think, Tom, by the way, that is the title of a book of travel photos and life observations. I think it would be a good one. I know you weren't quite sure when I mooted it during the show, and I hope you've been okay with me using it. It's got a wonderful sideways glance at life, that. It really has. Let's take a PS this week on life observations, and I'm going to quote a PS from a very special travel writer, sadly one no longer with us. I think I would love to have taken a photo walk or three with this man, although I might feel ever so slightly intimidated by his sheer cleverness. I am tempted to buy all of his works. I've just ordered Photographs and Notebooks, which is a collection of, well, as you would imagine, photographs and notes from his journeys. His papers, including 85 moleskin notebooks, which my friend Giles would absolutely adore, were given to the Bodleian Library in Oxford, which sounds like a photographic or Photowalk pilgrimage to me. See? Smallish adventures alongside the biggies. So Bruce Chatwin, that's the name of the British writer I'm using, I'm quoting a PS from today. Not your typical travel author. It said he redefined what a travel book could be. He was fascinated by the idea of movement, of being on the road, not just physically, but also spiritually. The songlines was his part travelogue, part philosophical meditation, in which he explores the ancient Aboriginal belief system of Australia. Specifically, the idea that the land is mapped not by borders or landmarks, but by songs. And his writing, his travel logs, the pictures that he makes along the paths, they're all forming some ideas I'd like to take back to India next year, and also to Mongolia, and our trips and our travels around Scotland as well. This idea of journaling, of writing alongside your photographs. Anyway, the postscript is from Bruce Chatwin. Two, actually, if you'll allow. Travel doesn't merely broaden the mind, it makes the mind. Oh, that's good. And this from Songlines. A person's real home is not a house, but the road. And that life itself is a journey to be walked on foot. Come on, pups. This way. Let's try and stay clear of the cows, shall we? I know you don't really get on with them. You're not called Sabarkalot for nothing, are you? Eh? Then shall we go and find don't tell anybody, a bacon butty? Yes, a bacon butty. I think we've earned it today.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.